Teen lies in court thinking she's going home. But the video reveals the truth. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Rain fell in sheets across the windshield as emergency lights painted the night in alternating flashes of red and blue. Officer Richard Donovan would later recall how the raindrops caught those lights, turning the whole scene into something out of a nightmare, beautiful and terrible all at once. I've been first responder at over 30 accident scenes in my career, Donovan told investigators. But this one stays with you. The 911 call had come in at 2:17 a.m. A passerby, truck driver Samuel Wells, reported what looked like a serious collision near the old Pinecrest textile factory. What Wells couldn't have known was that he was witnessing the aftermath of an event that would divide an entire community and raise questions about how well anyone can truly know the people they love. The twisted metal of what had once been a Honda Civic was wrapped partially around a concrete support pillar. Inside were 3 teenagers, 2 dead, 1 alive. When I approached the vehicle, I heard crying, Donovan said, his voice steady during recorded testimony. Female voice, disoriented, repeating the same phrase over and over. I couldn't see the road. I couldn't see the road. That voice belonged to 19-year-old Mackenzie Shirilla, the sole survivor of what appeared to be a tragic accident. Paramedics would find her pinned behind the steering wheel, covered in blood, most of it not her own. Beside her, in the passenger seat, was the body of her boyfriend, Ethan Cooper. Behind them both, 18-year-old Marcus Walters, Ethan's best friend since childhood, showed no signs of life. By sunrise, the news had spread through Pinecrest, Oregon, population 12,873, the kind of town where everyone knows everyone, where 3 families had just been shattered in an instant. 2 were planning funerals. 1 was keeping vigil at Pinecrest General Hospital. She's in shock, Lisa Shirilla told reporters gathered outside the hospital. The mother's face was drawn, eyes ringed with exhaustion. Please respect our privacy during this difficult time. Mackenzie lost her boyfriend and a dear friend. She's devastated. Photographs from local yearbooks soon appeared in news reports. Ethan Cooper, star of the baseball team, known for his easy smile. Marcus Walters, quieter, a photography enthusiast who'd already received a partial scholarship to study at Oregon State. And Mackenzie, beautiful, popular, active in community service. And now, the grieving girlfriend who'd somehow survived while the others had not. The car must have hydroplaned, James Shirilla, Mackenzie's father and a respected local business owner, explained to concerned neighbors. The road near the old factory is treacherous in the rain. It's a miracle our daughter survived at all. A miracle indeed. When investigators initially examined the scene, everything pointed to a straightforward, if tragic, accident. 3 teens out late, heavy rain, a dangerous curve, a moment's loss of control. 2 lives ended, 1 forever changed. The town of Pinecrest came together as small towns often do in tragedy. Flowers piled up at the crash site. Candlelight vigils were held at the high school the boys had graduated from just months earlier. And Mackenzie, her arm in a sling and her face bearing the faint marks of impact, became a figure of both sympathy and morbid fascination. I don't remember anything, she told Detective Sarah Reynolds during their first interview, tears streaming down her face. I just keep seeing their faces. Why them? Why not me? It was exactly what anyone would expect a traumatized survivor to say. The detective made a note in her file and closed it. Another tragic case of young lives cut short. What no one in Pinecrest could have known then was that a different story was waiting to be told. One that would begin with a single question from Eleanor Walters, Marcus's mother, asked through tears at her son's funeral reception. What were they doing at the old factory at 2 in the morning? It was the first pebble in what would become an avalanche. How many characters would you like for the next chapter? 1 week after the accident, Detective Sarah Reynolds sat at her desk reviewing the preliminary report. What had initially seemed like a straightforward case, tragic but clear-cut, was now assigned to her for routine follow-up, standard procedure for any fatal collision. even when the cause appeared obvious. I remember thinking it would be simple, Reynolds later admitted in an interview. Write it up, file it away. Let these families begin to heal. The detective was relatively new to Pinecrest, having moved from Portland 2 years earlier. This distance from the tight-knit community would later prove crucial. She wasn't blinded by the Sherilla family's standing or influenced by the wave of sympathy washing over the town. When Reynolds arrived at Pinecrest General to interview Mackenzie, she found the young woman sitting upright in bed, her mother hovering nearby. Mackenzie's physical injuries were surprisingly minor: a sprained wrist, facial contusions, and what her doctors described as a mild concussion. Mrs. Sherilla, I'd like to speak with your daughter alone if possible, Reynolds said. Absolutely not, Lisa Sherilla replied firmly. She's traumatized. Her doctor advised minimal stress. What followed was a brief interview that raised the first red flags in Reynolds' mind, though at the time she didn't recognize them as such. Mackenzie, can you tell me anything about what happened that night? Reynolds asked. Mackenzie's eyes welled with tears. We were just driving. It was raining so hard, I couldn't see. Her voice cracked with emotion. Why were you near the old factory district? A slight hesitation. I think we got turned around. I don't really remember. The doctors say that's normal with trauma. Throughout the interview, Reynolds noticed something curious. When discussing Ethan, Mackenzie became visibly distraught, her voice breaking, tears flowing freely. When Marcus's name came up, her emotional response was noticeably muted. I just wish I could remember more, Mackenzie concluded, her mother squeezing her hand supportively. Outside the hospital room, James Sherilla was waiting. Detective, my daughter needs rest, not interrogation. This was clearly a tragic accident. The road by the factory is notorious in bad weather. Reynolds nodded politely, but made a mental note. The Sherillas seemed less concerned with finding answers and more focused on establishing a specific narrative. Later that afternoon, Reynolds visited the Cooper family home. Ethan's parents sat, shell-shocked on their living room couch, surrounded by sympathy cards and casserole dishes brought by neighbors. Ethan never drove that way, his father said quietly. There's no reason for them to be near the factory. It's completely out of the way from anywhere they might have been going. Did Ethan mention any plans for that evening? Reynolds asked. Mrs. Cooper shook her head. Just that he was going out with Mackenzie and Marcus might join them later. They were supposed to see a movie. The last home Reynolds visited that day belonged to Eleanor Walters. Unlike the numbed grief of the Coopers or the protective stance of the Sherillas, Eleanor Walters radiated a different energy. Restless, questioning, unable to accept simple explanations. Detective, something doesn't add up, Eleanor said, leading Reynolds to her son's meticulously kept bedroom. Marcus texted me at 11:30, saying they weren't going to the movie after all. Said there was some kind of situation with Ethan and Mackenzie. She handed Reynolds her phone, showing the exchange. Marcus, change of plans, not seeing movie, heading out with E&M, some situation. Eleanor, everything okay? It's getting late. Marcus, it's fine. Ethan needs backup. Home by 1. Backup for what? Reynolds asked. That's what I want to know, Eleanor replied, her voice tight with controlled emotion. My son wasn't reckless. He wasn't the type to be joyriding in a rainstorm, and he certainly wouldn't have been anywhere near the old factory without a specific reason. As Reynolds drove back to the station, the facts as presented began to feel slightly off-kilter, like a picture hanging just a few degrees askew. The route to the factory made no sense. The Sherillas' insistence on the accident narrative seemed premature, and Marcus's cryptic text suggested something more complicated than 3 friends taking a late-night drive. Back at her desk, Reynolds opened a new file on her computer. Instead of finalizing the accident report as expected, she typed, "Further investigation required." What she didn't know then was that Eleanor Walters had already begun her own investigation, one that would lead to the first devastating revelation about what really happened that rainy night. 3 weeks after the crash, Mackenzie Sherilla returned to Pinecrest High School. Though she had graduated the previous spring along With Ethan and Marcus, she still volunteered with the drama department, helping younger students with set design. Her reappearance caused a ripple through the hallways, students whispering, teachers offering gentle smiles and supportive pats on the shoulder. It was like watching a performance, recalled Emma Delgado, a junior who had worked with Mackenzie on previous productions. One moment she'd be perfectly composed, the next she'd catch sight of something, Ethan's old locker, a photo on the bulletin board, and just collapse into tears. These emotional breakdowns, however genuine, they occurred with a curious predictability, always when others were watching, always followed by a circle of comforting friends and staff. Detective Reynolds observed this pattern during a follow-up visit to the school. She had come to speak with Michael Brennan, the school counselor who had worked closely with all three teenagers. Mackenzie's grief seems to come in waves, Reynolds noted, watching through the window as a group of students consoled a sobbing Mackenzie near the memorial that had been set up for the boys. Brennan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Grief affects everyone differently, Detective. Of course, Reynolds agreed. I'm just trying to understand these kids better. What was the dynamic between the three of them? Brennan hesitated, professional discretion warring with something else. Concern, perhaps. Ethan and Marcus had been friends since elementary school. Mackenzie and Ethan started dating about a year ago. Were they happy together? Ethan and Mackenzie? The counselor chose his words carefully. They presented as a typical high school couple. Popular, attractive, involved in school activities. Reynolds noticed the evasion. Mr. Brennan, this isn't about assigning blame for an accident. I'm just trying to understand the complete picture. After a long pause, Brennan sighed. There were incidents. Nothing I could break confidentiality over, but Mackenzie could be intense about her relationship with Ethan. Possessive, some might say. Can you elaborate? Once, Ethan missed a counseling appointment because Mackenzie was upset he'd been talking to another girl at lunch. Another time, he mentioned feeling monitored. His word, not mine. Brennan frowned. Look, most teenage relationships have drama. I wouldn't read too much into it. But Reynolds was beginning to see a pattern forming, one that continued to develop later that afternoon, when she received an unexpected visitor at the police station. Jessica Palmer was petite, with nervous eyes that darted around the interview room. A former classmate of the three teenagers, she had dated Ethan briefly before he and Mackenzie got together. I wasn't going to say anything, Jessica began, her voice barely above a whisper. But then I saw Mackenzie at school today, and everyone was treating her like some kind of tragic hero, and I just couldn't stay quiet anymore. Reynolds pushed a cup of water across the table. Take your time, Jessica. Ethan and I stayed friends after we broke up. Nothing romantic, just friends. But Mackenzie couldn't handle it. Jessica pulled out her phone. She sent me these last year. The messages were startling in their intensity. Unknown number. Stay away from Ethan, he's with me now, Jessica. Who is this? Unknown number. You know exactly who this is. I see how you look at him. Jessica. Mackenzie? Unknown number. First warning. There won't be a second. I showed these to Ethan, Jessica continued. He apologized, said she was insecure that he'd talked to her. After that, she was super nice to my face, but Ethan and I couldn't even study together without her somehow showing up. Did you ever feel threatened? Jessica stared at her hands. Not physically, but something about her. It was like she was always performing. Sweet and perfect when people were watching, but those eyes, they'd go cold sometimes just for a second, like a mask slipping. As Jessica left the station, Reynolds added her statement to the growing file. The accident narrative was beginning to fray at the edges, revealing glimpses of a more complicated reality underneath. That evening, Reynolds requested Mackenzie's medical records from the night of the accident. What she found, or rather, what she didn't find, added another troubling piece to the puzzle. Dr. Helen Park, who had treated Mackenzie in the ER, confirmed what the records suggested. We found no clinical evidence of a concussion, no abnormal neurological indicators, no loss of consciousness upon arrival. Her memory issues seemed selective, Reynolds thought back to Mackenzie's tearful claims of memory loss, the convenient gaps that centered specifically around the circumstances leading to the crash. The doctor's assessment cast these in a new, more calculated light. As she drove home that night, Reynolds' phone rang. It was Eleanor Walters, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "Detective, I've been going through Marcus's computer. There's something you need to see." A pause. "It's about the night they died, about what Mackenzie wasn't telling anyone." The following morning, when Reynolds arrived at the Walters home, she found not only Eleanor waiting for her, but also a visibly shaken teenage girl she didn't recognize, Lily Zhang, Marcus's chemistry lab partner and close friend. "Show her," Eleanor said softly to the girl. "Show her what you found." With trembling hands, Lily unlocked her phone and passed it to the detective. On the screen was a text conversation with Ethan Cooper, sent just hours before the crash. The message that would change everything about the investigation read simply, "I can't do this anymore. I'm breaking up with her tomorrow. Marcus is coming for moral support. I'm scared of how she'll react." "I never meant to keep it secret," Lily Zhang explained, her voice barely audible in Eleanor Walters' living room. Everyone was treating Mackenzie like this tragic figure, the grieving girlfriend. It didn't feel right to come forward with something that would hurt her even more." Detective Reynolds studied the text message again. The timestamp showed 10:43 p.m. on the night of the accident, less than 4 hours before the crash. "Did Ethan say anything else about why he wanted to break up?" Reynolds asked. Lily shook her head. "Not specifically in that message, but he'd been talking about it for weeks. He felt trapped, I guess," said Mackenzie. "Would get really upset if he even mentioned hanging out with friends without her." Eleanor Walters sat rigid on the couch, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "Marcus was worried about it too. He told me once that Ethan was walking on eggshells around Mackenzie." As Reynolds made notes, Lily continued hesitantly, "There's something else. 2 days before it happened, Marcus told me Mackenzie had gone through Ethan's phone while he was at baseball practice. She found messages between Ethan and his cousin about applying to colleges out of state. Colleges Mackenzie hadn't applied to. She confronted him?" Reynolds asked. "Worse, she didn't tell him she knew. Marcus said she started acting extra sweet, making plans for them both to attend community college here." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "That's why Ethan finally decided to end it. He said it. Felt like she was making decisions about his future without even talking to him." Eleanor stood abruptly, moving to a desk in the corner where Marcus's laptop sat open. "Detective, there's more." "Show her, Lily." The girl reluctantly took the computer and navigated to a password-protected folder. "Marcus gave me his passwords in case anything happened to him. We did that for each other after his dad died last year. Just a weird thing we did." She opened a video file. "I found this yesterday." The screen showed Marcus sitting in what appeared to be his bedroom, speaking directly to the eye. Camera. The timestamp indicated it was recorded the afternoon before the accident. "So, update on the Ethan situation," Marcus began, looking tired. "He's finally going to do it tomorrow. Break up with Mackenzie. I'm going with him for moral support because honestly, I'm worried about how she'll react." He ran a hand through his hair. "Ethan's genuinely scared, which sounds dramatic, but you haven't seen what I've seen. The mood swings, the guilt trips, the way she isolates him from everyone." Marcus leaned closer to the camera. "He showed me messages where she threatened to hurt herself if he ever left her. Who does that? So yeah, I'm going along as backup. We're meeting her at that old viewpoint near the factory. Neutral ground, public enough to be safe but private enough to avoid a scene." The video ended and the room fell silent. Reynolds felt a chill despite the warm spring day. What had initially seemed like a tragic accident was transforming before her eyes into something far more calculated. "The factory wasn't on their way anywhere," Eleanor said quietly. "It was their destination." Reynolds nodded, her mind racing through the implications. If Ethan had been planning to break up with Mackenzie, and if she somehow found out beforehand, before she could follow that thought to its conclusion, her phone rang. It was Victor Chen from Forensics. "Detective, You need to see this. The tire marks at the scene. They don't match what we'd expect from hydroplaning or loss of control. There's no evidence of braking or evasive action. If anything, the evidence suggests acceleration toward the impact point. Reynolds thanked him and ended the call, turning back to Eleanor and Lily. I need copies of everything you found. Messages, videos, anything else that might help establish the relationship dynamics between these three. As she was preparing to leave, Eleanor grabbed her arm. There's a memorial service for both boys at the school tomorrow. Mackenzie will be there. You should see how she performs for an audience. The memorial service was held in the Pinecrest High Gymnasium, decorated with photos of Ethan and Marcus, their baseball jerseys, and their academic awards. The bleachers were packed with students, teachers, and community members, all united in grief. Reynolds stood at the back, watching as various people came forward to share memories. When Mackenzie's turn came, the detective paid close attention to not just what she said, but how she said it. Dressed in somber black, Mackenzie approached the microphone with the perfect embodiment of dignified grief. Ethan was the love of my life, she began, her voice breaking at exactly the right moment. We had so many plans. As Mackenzie spoke about their relationship, painting a picture of perfect harmony and future dreams, Reynolds noticed Eleanor Walters stand up abruptly in the third row. With deliberate steps, Eleanor moved to the center aisle. Stop, she said, her voice cutting through Mackenzie's practiced speech. Just stop. A murmur ran through the crowd as Eleanor continued, her grief transforming into anger. My son is dead because he was trying to help his friend escape a toxic relationship. Ethan was planning to break up with you, Mackenzie. That's why they were at the factory that night. The gymnasium fell silent. All eyes moved from Eleanor to Mackenzie, whose expression flickered momentarily before settling back into wounded innocence. Mrs. Walters, I understand you're grieving, she said softly. We all are. But what you're saying, it's not true. Ethan loved me. We were happy. Show them your phone then, Eleanor challenged. Show them the threatening messages you sent him when he tried to spend time with his friends. Show them the plans you made for his future without asking him. As whispers spread through the crowd, James Shirilla stood up, placing himself protectively between his daughter and Eleanor. That's enough. My daughter is a victim here, not a villain. She nearly died in that car too. The principal quickly stepped in, ending the memorial and asking people to leave calmly. As the crowd dispersed, Reynolds watched the community split in real time, some moving to comfort Mackenzie, others standing uncertainly near Eleanor, questions forming in their eyes. Later that evening, Reynolds received another call from Victor Chen. Detective, we've been examining Mackenzie's phone records. From the provider. On the night of the accident, she made a call to Ethan at 10:55 p.m., right after his text to Lily about breaking up. The call lasted 3 minutes. She knew, Reynolds said quietly. She knew he was planning to end it. There's more, Chen continued. We checked the location, data from her phone for the week leading up to the accident. Mackenzie had been to the area around the factory 3 times in the previous 5 days. Always late at night. Always alone. Reynolds felt the case shifting beneath her feet like quicksand. This was no longer an investigation into a tragic accident. It was becoming something much darker, and the memorial confrontation had just exposed their suspicions to the entire town, including Mackenzie herself. Keep digging, Reynolds told Chen, and keep it quiet. If what we're thinking is true, we need to be careful, very careful. What she didn't say was what they were both thinking, that they might be building a case not for negligent homicide, but for premeditated murder. The day after the memorial service confrontation, Pinecrest divided like a cell under microscope. Social media exploded with hashtags. Justice for Ethan. And Marcus competed with Dagger Stand with Mackenzie. The town that had come together in grief now pulled apart in suspicion and doubt. Detective Reynolds arrived at the station to find Chief Williams waiting at her desk, his expression grave. You've stirred up a hornet's nest, Sarah, said, closing her office door. James Shirilla called this morning. He's threatening a harassment lawsuit against the department and specifically naming you. Reynolds placed her files on the desk. I haven't harassed anyone, Chief. I'm following evidence. Evidence of what exactly? These boys died in a car accident. I'm not so sure anymore. She outlined what they'd discovered. The planned breakup, Mackenzie's knowledge of it, the forensic inconsistencies, her prior visits to the crash site. The chief's frown deepened. The Shirillas are powerful in this town, Sarah. James has friends. On the town council, the school board. Are you telling me to drop it? I'm telling you to be damn sure before you accuse a traumatized young woman of murder. If you're wrong, it's not just your career at stake. As if summoned by their conversation, a knock came at the door. Officer Donovan C. entered, looking uncomfortable. Sorry to interrupt, but Thomas Ward is here. He says he's representing Mackenzie Shirilla and demands to speak with whoever's leading the investigation. Thomas Ward was Pinecrest's most prominent attorney, impeccably dressed and radiating controlled aggression as he sat across from Reynolds. My client is being subjected to a whisper campaign led by a grieving mother and seemingly endorsed by this police department, Ward began. The emotional distress this is causing after her traumatic experience is unconscionable. Reynolds met his gaze steadily. We're investigating a collision that killed 2 people, Mr. Ward. That's our job. A tragic accident that nearly claimed my client as well, Ward corrected. Yet I understand you've been collecting private messages, interviewing classmates about relationship drama, and encouraging speculation about my client's character, none of which has any bearing on a hydroplaning accident. Our forensic analysis suggests it wasn't hydroplaning, Reynolds countered. Ward's smile didn't reach his eyes. Your analysis suggests no such thing, Detective. I've reviewed the preliminary report myself. The conditions were textbook for hydroplaning. Heavy rain, worn road surface, a curve. He placed a folder on her desk. Inside you'll find statements from 3 road safety experts who've reviewed the scene. All concur with the initial assessment. This was a tragic accident, nothing more. Experts, hired by the Shirilla family? Does that make their expertise less valid? Ward stood. Detective Reynolds, my client has suffered enough. This stops now, or the harassment suit will be just the beginning. After Ward left, Reynolds called Victor Chen. Tell me about those tire marks again. Consistent with acceleration, not hydroplaning, Chen confirmed. And there's something else. We found trace evidence of brake fluid on the ground, but not from impact. It appears the brake line may have been leaking before the crash. Tampered with. I can't say conclusively yet, but the pattern. It's unusual. Reynolds hung up and stared at the wall, thinking. Ward's intervention meant one thing for certain. The Shirillas were getting nervous. That afternoon, Eleanor Walters appeared at the station, her face drawn, but determined. They're trying to silence me, she said without preamble. Lisa Shirilla is telling everyone I'm having a breakdown. That grief is making me irrational. Are you still getting threats? Eleanor nodded. Anonymous calls, social media messages. But I won't stop, not until the truth comes out. She placed a small notebook on the desk. Marcus kept a journal. I found this hidden in his room last night. Reynolds opened it carefully. The final entry, dated the day before the accident, read, Ethan showed me more messages from M today. She wrote, if I can't have you, no one will, after he mentioned applying to out-of-state colleges. He laughed it off, but I could tell he was scared. I'm worried she might actually hurt herself when he breaks it off tomorrow. That's why I agreed to go along, to make sure nobody does anything stupid. I just want him free from this toxic situation. As Reynolds closed the journal, her phone buzzed with a text from Chen. You need to see this. Found deleted search history from MS's phone backup. Searches include car accident survival rates, fatal collision impact speeds, and how to cut brake lines without detection. You understand what you're suggesting, don't you? District Attorney Patricia Gonzalez studied the evidence laid out across her conference table. Photos of tire marks, phone records, journal entries, and a printout of the disturbing search history from Mackenzie's phone. Reynolds nodded. I'm suggesting that Mackenzie Shirilla premeditated this crash, that it wasn't an accident at all. Gonzalez, a veteran prosecutor with 20 years of experience, tapped her pen against the search history. How to cut brake lines without detection. That's damning. but the defense will argue these searches were for a creative writing project, a school assignment, morbid teenage curiosity, anything but actual intent. The timing lines up perfectly, Reynolds countered. She conducted these searches right after Ethan talked to his cousin about out-of-state colleges. Then she visited the factory area 3 times before the crash, like she was scouting locations. And the brake fluid. Evidence? Chen is still analyzing it, but preliminary findings suggest tampering. The line appears to have been partially cut, enough to cause eventual failure, not immediate detection. Gonzalez sighed, removing her glasses to rub her eyes. Thomas Ward is already painting Mackenzie as a second victim, a grieving girlfriend being persecuted by an overzealous detective and a mother driven mad by grief. Half the town believes him, and the other half knows something isn't right, Reynolds said. The evidence speaks for itself. Evidence can be interpreted different ways. You need more. Sarah, something concrete that shows intent beyond reasonable doubt. As Reynolds left the DA's office, her phone rang. It was Michael Brennan, the school counselor. I've been thinking about our conversation, he said, his voice tight with tension. There's something I didn't tell you, something I should have. 20 minutes later, Reynolds was in Brennan's office at the high school, door closed, blinds drawn. I could lose my job for this, he began, pacing behind his desk. There's confidentiality to consider, but with 2 students dead, he took a deep breath. Last semester, Ethan came to me. He showed me text messages from Mackenzie threatening self-harm if he ever left her. Do you still have these messages? Brennan shook his head. I encouraged him to screenshot them, but I didn't keep copies. That would violate privacy protocols. But there was one incident that crosses the line into something I should have reported. He sat down heavily. Ethan showed me marks on his arm, fingernail scratches, deep ones. He said Mackenzie had grabbed him when he tried to leave her house after an argument. Said she'd rather see him hurt than with someone else. You didn't report this? Ethan begged me not to. Said he was handling it, that they were working things out. Brennan's face crumpled with guilt. I should have done more. Now he's dead, and I keep wondering if I could have prevented it. Reynolds assured him he wasn't responsible and asked him to document his recollections. As she left the school, her phone buzzed with a text from Chen. Brake line definitely tampered with. Found tool marks consistent with wire cutters. This was deliberate. The investigation was accelerating, but Reynolds knew they still lacked the smoking gun needed to move forward. With serious charges, the evidence remained circumstantial, damning patterns that still left room for reasonable doubt. That changed the next morning when a call came in from Frank Ramirez, the mechanic who had examined the crashed vehicle. Detective, we missed something in our initial inspection, he said, excitement evident in his voice. I was reviewing the photos again and noticed the steering column had been subtly modified. Someone loosened key components, not enough to cause immediate failure, but enough that under stress the steering would become unresponsive. Could that happen naturally in a crash? Not a chance. This was deliberate sabotage, and it took knowledge, planning, and access to the vehicle before the incident. Reynolds thanked him and immediately called Chen, who confirmed he would retrieve the steering column for further analysis. Pieces were falling into place, but Reynolds knew they needed to move carefully. If they were right about Mackenzie, they were dealing with someone calculating enough to orchestrate 2 deaths while positioning herself as a victim. As she compiled her growing evidence file, Officer Donovan knocked on her door. Detective, there's a Tyler Wilson here. Says he has information about Mackenzie Sharilla that you need to hear. The young man who entered looked like he hadn't slept in days, anxiety radiating from him in palpable waves. I should have come forward sooner, he began, his voice barely audible. But I was afraid. Mackenzie, she's not who everyone thinks she is. What do you mean? Tyler took a shaky breath. The night before the crash, I overheard her on the phone. She was in her car outside my house waiting for my sister. I heard her say, by this time tomorrow it'll all be over. He thinks he can leave me? I'd rather see him dead. Tyler Wilson sat hunched forward in the interview room, fingers laced tightly together as if to stop his hands from shaking. Detective Reynolds recorded his statement while Officer Donovan took notes. I didn't think much of it at the time, Tyler continued. People say things when they're angry. But after the accident, he swallowed hard. After I heard what Mrs. Walters said at the memorial, it all clicked. Did you tell anyone what you heard? Reynolds asked. Tyler shook his head. I was scared. Mackenzie has a way of making people regret crossing her. Last year, a girl named Amber Nelson accused her of stealing a bracelet. Within a week, rumors destroyed Amber's reputation. She had to change schools. Reynolds had heard this name before. Amber Nelson was Mackenzie's friend? Best friends since middle school, until the bracelet incident. Mackenzie can turn on anyone in an instant. After Tyler left, Reynolds immediately dispatched an officer to locate Amber Nelson. If there was anyone who might know Mackenzie's true nature, it would be a former best friend turned enemy. Meanwhile, the forensic evidence continued. Mounting. Chen called with confirmation about the steering column. Tool marks on the steering components match a set of wrenches found in the Shirilla's garage, he reported. And we've verified the brake line was deliberately compromised. This vehicle was sabotaged by someone with access in basic mechanical knowledge. Reynolds updated D.A. Gonzalez, who authorized a formal request for Mackenzie's complete electronic records. By that afternoon, a more comprehensive picture of Mackenzie's digital footprint emerged, revealing a disturbing timeline. 3 weeks before the crash, Ethan texts his cousin about applying to colleges in California. 2 weeks before, Mackenzie accesses Ethan's phone while he's at practice, begins searches about car accidents. 10 days before, first reconnaissance visit to the factory area. 5 days before, purchase of basic tools from a hardware store on her father's credit card. Night before the crash, phone call that Tyler overheard. Final text exchange with Ethan arranging their meeting. She was methodical, Reynolds told Chief Williams. This wasn't a crime of passion. She planned it step by step. The chief, initially skeptical, now looked deeply troubled. What's our next move? We need to bring her in for questioning. Apply pressure, see if she breaks. Ward will have her lawyered up to the teeth. She won't say a word. Maybe not, Reynolds conceded. But her reaction might tell us something, and it sends a message. We're not buying the grieving girlfriend act anymore. That evening, Reynolds and Officer Donovan arrived at the Shirilla residence with a request for Mackenzie to come to the station for questioning. James Shirilla answered the door, his face flushing with anger. This harassment has gone far enough, he snapped. My daughter is still recovering from trauma, and you people are treating her like a criminal. We just want to ask her some questions, Mr. Shirilla, Reynolds said calmly. She's free to have an attorney present. You can direct all questions to Thomas Ward. He began closing the door. Sir, Reynolds said, placing her foot in the doorway, this investigation is ongoing. One way or another, we will be speaking with your daughter. How that happens is up to you. From inside the house came a soft voice. Dad, it's okay. Mackenzie appeared in the hallway behind her father, wearing a University of Oregon sweatshirt, Ethan's school of choice. I have nothing to hide. The performance continued at the station. Mackenzie, flanked by her father and Thomas Ward, maintained her composure through 2 hours of questioning. She had plausible explanations for everything. The searches were for a creative writing assignment. The hardware store purchase was for a garden project. Her visits to the factory area were to photograph the sunset from the overlook for an Instagram series. What about the phone call Tyler Wilson overheard? Reynolds asked. Mackenzie's expression flickered briefly before settling back into practiced innocence. I don't know what he thinks he heard, but I never said anything like that. Tyler barely knows me. Why would he make this up? Perhaps because Eleanor Walters has been spreading her conspiracy theories throughout town, Ward interjected, suggesting my client committed murder without a shred of credible evidence. As the interview concluded, Reynolds felt frustrated. Mackenzie had maintained her narrative flawlessly, never cracking under pressure, but something about her performance seemed rehearsed, calculated, especially the convenient explanation for every piece of evidence. That feeling was confirmed the next morning when Officer Donovan burst into her office. We found Amber Nelson, he said breathlessly, and you're going to want to hear what she has to say. The girl who entered Reynolds's office looked haunted, glancing repeatedly over her shoulder, as if expecting someone to appear behind her. Before I tell you anything, she said quietly, I need to know you can protect me from her. Because what I have will destroy Mackenzie Shirilla's perfect image forever, and she'll do anything to stop that from happening. From her backpack, Amber withdrew a phone in a protective case. I kept this as insurance after what she did to me last year. It's my old phone with all our conversations still on it. She placed it on the desk with trembling fingers, including her detailed instructions for how to disable someone's car if you want to teach them a lesson. Amber Nelson's phone contained a digital Pandora's box. Within an hour of its delivery to the digital forensics team, Detective Reynolds was staring at conversations that spanned more than 18 months of friendship between Amber and Mackenzie, conversations that revealed a side of Mackenzie Shirilla that few had witnessed. This goes back to their junior year, Chen explained, scrolling through the archived messages. Look at this exchange from when Mackenzie first became interested in Ethan Cooper. The messages told a chilling story. Mackenzie. Jessica is still texting him. She needs to back off. Amber. They're just friends. You said yourself there's nothing going on. Mackenzie. Doesn't matter. He's mine now. I've planned too carefully for her to ruin it. Amber. What do you mean planned? Mackenzie. You don't become popular by accident. Everything is strategic. The right boyfriend, the right activities, the right image. Ethan is perfect. Baseball star, good grades, nice family. He completes the picture. Amber. That sounds cold. Mackenzie. It's just how the world works. You take what you want. And I want Ethan. Chen scrolled forward several months. Here's where it gets concerning. Ethan apparently tried to break things off once before. Mackenzie. He tried to end it. Can you believe that? Amber. What happened? Mackenzie. I showed him what happens when people disappoint me. Amber. Mac, you're scaring me. What did you do? Mackenzie. Relax. I just made sure he understood what he'd lose. Told him I'd hurt myself if he left. Works every time. Now he's being extra attentive, feeling guilty. It's actually better than before. Amber. That's really messed up. Mackenzie. It's called keeping what's mine. You should try it sometime. But the most damning exchange came from 3 months before the accident, after a fight between Amber and Mackenzie over a missing bracelet. Mackenzie. You're going to regret crossing me. Amber. It was my grandmother's bracelet, Mac. I just asked if you borrowed. Illy Mackenzie. You accused me of stealing. Nobody does that and gets away with it. Amber. You're overreacting. This isn't healthy. Mackenzie. Want to know something I learned from my dad's mechanic? How to disable someone's car without them knowing. Just a little adjustment to the brake line, the steering column. They won't know until it's too late. Maybe I should practice on your mom's car. Amber. Are you threatening me? Mackenzie. Just sharing fun facts. Sleep well. Reynolds looked up from the screen, meeting Chen's troubled gaze. This could be enough for a warrant. She specifically mentioned tampering with brake lines and steering. Exactly what was done to the car that crashed. There's more, Chen said, pulling up location data. On the night of the accident, Amber's phone pinged near Lily Zhang's house at the exact time Ethan texted Lily about breaking up with Mackenzie. You think Mackenzie was spying on them? Saw the message somehow? It's possible. Either way, we have proof she knew exactly how to sabotage a vehicle and had threatened to do it before. Reynolds immediately called D.A. Gonzalez, who arrived within the hour to review the new evidence. This changes everything, Gonzalez said, setting down Amber's sworn statement. I'll request an arrest warrant first thing in the morning. We have enough to charge her with 2 counts of second-degree murder. She'll claim these were just angry texts, empty threats, Reynolds cautioned. Perhaps, but coupled with the forensic evidence, the search history, and the timing of everything, Gonzalez's expression hardened. This wasn't an accident. This was premeditated murder, disguised to look like a tragic crash. The texts established knowledge, motive, and intent. That night, Reynolds couldn't sleep. Tomorrow would bring Mackenzie's arrest, a moment that would shock the community, and finally begin the process of real justice for Ethan and Marcus. Yet something still bothered her, a missing piece that would make the case airtight. Her phone rang at 5:47 a.m. It was Officer Donovan. "Detective, we have a problem. The Shirilla's house is empty. Neighbors say they left around midnight with suitcases, and Mackenzie's passport is missing from the record system. Someone with admin access deleted her from the database." Reynolds sat up, instantly alert. "James Shirilla has friends in the A. County Clerk's office. They're running. There's an APB out already. But there's something else. Eleanor Walters called in. She says someone broke into her house last night and stole Marcus's laptop and journal." Reynolds felt a chill run through her. Mackenzie's covering her tracks. She knows. "We're close." By noon, the Shirilla family car was located abandoned at Portland International Airport. Security footage showed the three of them boarding a private plane registered to one of James Shirilla's business associates. "They flew to Vancouver," Chief Williams informed Reynolds. "From there, we lose them. Could be anywhere by now." The case that had seemed on the verge of resolution now threatened to unravel completely. Without Mackenzie in custody, public opinion began to shift again. Some wondering if her flight indicated guilt, others suggesting she'd been driven away by persecution. Reynolds was clearing her whiteboard that evening, frustrated by the setback, when her desk phone rang. "Detective Reynolds? This is Martin Geller, security director at the old Pinecrest textile factory. One of my guys was reviewing old footage after hearing about your investigation. We have cameras on the exterior that haven't been checked in months." He paused. "One of them captured the accident. The entire thing, clear as day. And I have to tell you, this was no accident. Not even close. The security footage from the abandoned Pinecrest textile factory arrived on a thumb drive, delivered personally by Martin Geller. Detective Reynolds, D.A. Gonzalez, and Chief Williams gathered in the conference room, blinds drawn, as Chen connected the drive to a laptop. "The camera was installed years ago when there were break-ins," Geller explained. "It's motion-activated, runs on a backup battery, and uploads to our cloud server once a week. Nobody's checked it in months because nothing ever happens out there." The video began playing on the wall-mounted screen. Grainy but clear enough, it showed a rain-soaked parking area near the factory's old loading dock. The timestamp read 2:11 a.m., just minutes before the crash. "There," Geller pointed as headlights appeared in the frame. The Honda Civic pulled into view, stopping about 30 yards from the camera. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened, and Mackenzie Shirilla stepped out into the rain. Lone. "Where are Ethan and Marcus?" Reynolds asked, leaning forward. The answer came seconds later as Mackenzie walked to the back door and opened it. From the camera angle, they could see her pulling someone, Marcus, who appeared to be struggling to stay upright. "Is he drugged?" Gonzalez asked. "He could be," Reynolds said. "We never got tox screens because the accident explanation seemed sufficient initially." On screen, Mackenzie maneuvered Marcus into the passenger seat, then returned to the driver's position. The car remained stationary for another minute before suddenly accelerating. Forward, out of the camera's view. "That's it?" Chief Williams asked, sounding disappointed. "We don't see the actual impact." "Wait," Geller said. "There's a second camera. This one covers the north side of the property." The next clip showed a different angle. The Civic appeared at high speed, heading directly toward a concrete support pillar. There was no attempt to turn or brake. In the final frames before impact, the driver's face was briefly illuminated by security lights. Mackenzie's expression not one of panic, but grim determination. The room fell silent as the footage ended. It was Gonzalez who finally spoke. "This is definitive. She deliberately drove that car into the concrete at high speed." She turned to Reynolds. "But I'm confused. Where was Ethan? We only saw her moving Marcus." Reynolds rewound and paused the first video. "Look at the front passenger seat. There's someone slumped there already. Must be Ethan." She studied the grainy image. "They both appear unconscious or incapacitated." "She drugged them," Chief Williams said flatly. "Got them to meet her, drugged them somehow, then staged it to look like an accident, while ensuring she'd survive." Reynolds added, "Notice the seatbelt she carefully fastened for herself, and the angle of impact, driver's side protected by the engine block." Gonzalez was already on her phone, calling a judge for emergency warrants. "We need international alerts. border notifications, everything. This is now a first-degree murder case with flight to avoid prosecution. As the law enforcement machinery began moving at full speed, Reynolds stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The case had transformed from a suspected accident to something far more sinister. A calculated double murder committed by a young woman who'd rather kill than lose control of someone she claimed to love. 3 days passed with no sign of the Shirillas. Interpol was notified, borders were flagged, but the family seemed to have vanished. Meanwhile, Reynolds coordinated with the medical examiner to re-examine tissue. Samples from Ethan and Marcus. The results confirmed their suspicions. Both victims had significant levels of zolpidem in their systems, the ME reported. That's a prescription sleep medication. The amounts suggest they were heavily sedated, possibly unconscious at the time of impact. Mackenzie had access to prescription drugs? Reynolds asked. Her mother had a prescription for insomnia, Chen confirmed, checking pharmacy records. Refilled 2 weeks before the crash. The evidence was overwhelming. Reynolds called Eleanor Walters to update her, only to find the grieving mother had become the target of harassment from Mackenzie's remaining supporters. Someone spray-painted liar on my garage door last night, Eleanor said, her voice tired but resolute. Half the town still thinks I'm crazy, that Mackenzie is the real victim who fled persecution. The video changes everything, Reynolds assured her. We'll release a statement soon. That evening, Reynolds received an unexpected visitor at the station. It was Jessica Palmer, Ethan's ex-girlfriend, clutching her phone with trembling hands. I just got this, she said, showing Reynolds the screen. It's from an anonymous number, but I know it's her. It has to be. The text message read, "They're looking in all the wrong places. A smart girl always has a backup plan. Grief is such a useful disguise. Don't worry. I haven't forgotten about you either." Reynolds immediately had the message traced. The result sent a chill through the investigation team. It had been sent from within Pinecrest less than an hour ago. She never left, Reynolds realized. The airport, the private plane, it was all misdirection. Her parents may have fled, but Mackenzie is still here. As the team scrambled to organize a search, another officer rushed in with breaking news. Detective, someone just broke into the evidence room at the county courthouse. The only thing taken was the thumb drive containing the security footage from the factory. Before Reynolds could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Catch me if you can, detective. The real game is just beginning. Detective Reynolds stood in the empty evidence room, examining the jimmied lock. Whoever had broken in knew exactly what they wanted and where to find it. This wasn't opportunistic. It was targeted. Security cameras? She asked the court officer beside her. He shook his head. Disabled remotely, someone who knows our systems. The courthouse had a limited security staff, and many employees had access to the evidence room. Finding the culprit wouldn't be easy, but Reynolds had a strong suspicion that either Mackenzie had help from inside or had somehow managed the break-in herself. Make copies of the security footage, Reynolds instructed Chen. Multiple copies, different locations. She's trying to destroy evidence. Back at the station, Reynolds organized a strategy session with every available officer. Mackenzie Shirilla is our primary suspect in a double homicide, now compounded by fleeing prosecution and evidence tampering. She's likely still in Pinecrest, possibly disguised, definitely dangerous. Where would she hide? Officer Donovan asked. Her house is under surveillance. She'd need somewhere familiar, somewhere she feels safe, Reynolds reasoned. Start with friends, distant relatives, any property owned by the Shirilla family. As the team dispersed, Reynolds' phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. You're wasting your time. I'm closer than you think. The message was traced to a burner phone purchased with cash at a convenience store just outside town. Security footage showed a figure in a hooded jacket, face carefully angled away from cameras. Impossible to identify. That evening, Reynolds drove to Eleanor Walters' house to check on her safety, concerned that Mackenzie might target her next. She found Eleanor sitting on her porch, expression calm despite the circumstances. I'm not hiding, Eleanor said simply. Let her come for me if she wants. That's not a good idea, Reynolds cautioned. We believe Mackenzie is still in town and she's growing more reckless. Eleanor nodded toward a car parked across the street. I know. That's why I hired private security. I won't live in fear of a teenage psychopath. Reynolds admired her courage but worried it might provoke Mackenzie further. We'll have a patrol car drive by regularly, just in case. Returning to her own home that night, Reynolds felt an odd sensation, the prickling awareness of being watched. Nothing concrete, just intuition honed by years on the job. She checked her locks twice and kept her service weapon close. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Amber Nelson called just after midnight, voice hushed and frightened. She contacted me, Amber whispered. Mackenzie, she wants to meet. Where are you? Reynolds asked, instantly alert. Home. She sent a message on Instagram from a fake account. Says she wants to explain her side. Make me understand. What did you tell her? I said I'd think about it. I was too scared to say no. Reynolds made a quick decision. Respond. Tell her you'll meet her, but we'll be there too. The trap was set for the next morning. A meeting at the park near the high school, chosen because it offered both open visibility and multiple access points for police. Amber, wearing a wire, would sit on a specific bench while officers in plain clothes positioned themselves strategically throughout the area. At the appointed time, Amber took her seat, eyes scanning nervously. Reynolds and Donovan monitored, from an unmarked car nearby, listening through the wire. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Amber remained alone. She's not coming, Donovan said finally. Just then, the radio crackled with an urgent message from another officer. Detective, we've got a problem. Eleanor Walters just called 911. Someone broke into her house. Her security guard is down, possibly drugged. Reynolds felt her blood run cold. It was a diversion, she realized. Mackenzie never intended to meet Amber. They arrived at Eleanor's house in minutes, finding the security guard unconscious but alive in his car. Inside, Eleanor sat calmly at her kitchen table, unharmed but visibly shaken. She was here, Eleanor said simply, standing in my bedroom when I woke up. Did she hurt you? Reynolds asked, checking for injuries. No, she just wanted to talk. Eleanor's voice was steady despite the ordeal. She said I needed to understand her side of the story. What did she tell you? Eleanor looked up, her expression unreadable. She said she loved Ethan too much to let him go, that Marcus was turning him against her, that neither of us could possibly understand what real love feels like. Reynolds noted officers securing the perimeter, searching for evidence of how Mackenzie had entered and exited. There's something else, Eleanor added, pushing a folded paper across the table. She left this for you. Reynolds opened it carefully, revealing a handwritten note. Detective, you think you know me, but you've only seen what I wanted you to see. The grieving girlfriend was just Act 1. Ready for Act 2? Turn on your TV at noon today. The town of Pinecrest is about to get the performance of a lifetime. Reynolds checked her watch. 11:52 a.m. 8 minutes until whatever Mackenzie had planned. At exactly noon, every television in Pinecrest broadcasting the local news channel suddenly switched to an unexpected feed. Mackenzie Shirilla, sitting in what appeared to be a hotel room, looking directly into the camera. She'd somehow hacked into the local broadcast system. People of Pinecrest, she began, her voice steady. You've heard lies about me. Detective Reynolds has painted me as a monster, but I loved Ethan. What happened was an accident. A tragic accident twisted into something sinister by a grieving mother and an ambitious detective. Tears streamed down her face as she continued her performance. I'm innocent, but I can't get a fair trial here. The video they claim to have is manipulated. I would never hurt Ethan. The broadcast cut off abruptly. Reynolds immediately traced its origin to the Pinecrest Motel, but by the time officers arrived, Mackenzie was gone, leaving behind only equipment stolen from the high school's media lab and a note, always one step ahead. The broadcast polarized Pinecrest further. Despite mounting evidence, many still believed Mackenzie's tearful declaration of innocence. Social media exploded with competing hashtags. Justice for Boys versus Free Mackenzie. Meanwhile, Reynolds discovered how Mackenzie had survived in town undetected. Tyler Wilson confessed that his sister, still believing in Mackenzie's innocence, had been hiding her in their basement while their parents worked night shifts. She manipulated my sister completely, Tyler explained. Convinced her the police were persecuting her out of embarrassment for initially ruling it an accident. A break came when pharmacy records revealed a new prescription for sleep medication, filled under Lisa Sharilla's name. Impossible since Lisa had fled the country. Security footage showed a girl in a wig picking up the medication. She's planning something else, Reynolds realized. Another performance, or worse. The next morning, Amber Nelson received another message. Time for the finale. You chose the wrong side. The courthouse parking lot emptied quickly as the bomb threat was called in. Except it wasn't a bomb, but a diversionary tactic. While law enforcement scrambled to secure the courthouse, the real target was the police station's evidence room. Officer Chen discovered the breach. Someone had accessed the digital evidence files using Chief Williams's credentials. The backup footage of the crash had been corrupted, replaced with an edited version showing a deer darting in front of the car. She's erasing proof of her guilt, Reynolds said as technicians worked to recover the original files. Meanwhile, Eleanor Walters called with alarming news. Someone broke into my house again. They left Marcus's old baseball jersey on my bed, covered in what looks like blood. Forensics confirmed it wasn't blood, but theatrical makeup. The message was clear. Mackenzie was escalating her psychological warfare, targeting those she blamed for her exposure. That night, Jessica Palmer's car exploded in her driveway, thankfully empty, but the message was unmistakable. Pinecrest was now effectively a hostage to Mackenzie's vengeance campaign. The community lived in fear for 3 days until a groundskeeper at Pinecrest Cemetery reported someone visiting Ethan's grave before dawn. Security cameras captured Mackenzie placing flowers, seemingly unaware of surveillance. Reynolds organized a silent operation, positioning officers throughout the cemetery for the next morning. At 5:47 a.m., Mackenzie returned, this time dressed in black, her hair dyed brown. The arrest was anticlimactic. She offered no resistance as officers surrounded her, almost as if she'd been expecting them. In custody, she maintained an eerie calm, refusing legal representation, insisting on speaking directly to Reynolds. "You think this is over?" Mackenzie said, smiling slightly. "But you haven't seen the final act." Her cryptic statement became clear when Martin Geller called in a panic. The factory. Someone set explosives. The cameras, the physical evidence at the crash site. It's all gone. Despite this setback, D.A. Gonzalez remained confident. "We still have the forensics, the text messages, the witness statements, and something she couldn't destroy, the backup security footage stored on the cloud server." As Mackenzie's trial approached, Reynolds received one final message, smuggled through another inmate. Destroying evidence was never the point. "I just needed you to know I could." The courtroom fell silent as the security footage played on the large screen. 6 seconds that captured Mackenzie Sharilla deliberately accelerating toward the concrete pillar, her face showing not panic, but resolve. The defense team's arguments about accidental hydroplaning collapsed under the weight of this visual evidence. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning with a guilty verdict on all counts, 2 charges of first-degree murder, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. As the verdict was read, Mackenzie's carefully maintained facade finally cracked. The mask of innocent grief slipped away, revealing cold rage as she was led from the courtroom. "The truth doesn't cry," Eleanor Walters told reporters afterward. "It waits." 1 year later, Eleanor established the Cooper Walters Foundation, dedicated to educating young people about recognizing manipulative relationships. Detective Reynolds served on its advisory board, bringing her investigative expertise to help identify warning signs others might miss. The case transformed Pinecrest forever, the community that had once been so easily divided by Mackenzie's performance of innocence now understood how thoroughly they had been manipulated, not just after the crash, but for years before it. In her maximum security cell, Mackenzie Sharilla maintained her innocence in interviews, still playing the role of wrongfully accused victim. But the security footage spoke the truth her tears could not. revealing the calculated determination of someone who decided that if she couldn't control Ethan Cooper in life, she would control his fate in death. The documentary concludes as it began, with Officer Donovan's somber reflection. In 20 years of law enforcement, I've learned that the most dangerous people aren't always those who look dangerous. Sometimes they're the ones who seem the most normal, the most sympathetic, the ones who can cry on cue and make you believe every tear.